I agree with including deans in that list. I just want to let you know that I'm about bringing deans forward to the board to create a new administrative position within the district that relates to that is essentially the dean role. Because obviously we felt for some time that it was not appropriate for the dean, that role, to be within the unit. And so we are planning to bring that forward within the next month to the school. And so as it stands, that's our response to 1.01.
Okay.
All right, and so as we dive in, this is our first real proposal. You'll notice a theme, because it's open book. We really felt like this was the time for us to go through and really make sure that we are in compliance with what state law requires. Okay, and so one of those items is in 447.501. That's the unfair labor practice provision. It prohibits public entities from contributing financial support to employee organizations. And so that will be, there's a couple of different places that we've identified within this collective bargaining agreement where we have agreed to impermissible language, because it does allow for public support of the employee organization, which is in violation of 447. So, I mean, what we're going to do is propose the language, and ultimately the language isn't, because it's in violation of 447, it's not enforceable. And so at the end of the day, what we need to do as an alternative collaboratively is to come up with alternatives. And that's what we've tried to propose to get us off the start. But at the end of the day, that's the bottom line on it, is that those provisions that are in violation of state law are not enforceable. And, if we cannot agree to change the language voluntarily, then ultimately we won't have the ability to enforce that language on a move forward basis. So it's in both of our best interests to try and get to language that meets. Okay. So in this case, we're on 3.02, addressing item 3. And this is specifically related to the basically when the LCTA does a public records request, and we are required to compile information, which is more times than not. Very rarely is it ever that the district is not spending a significant amount of time compiling data for public records requests on behalf of LCTA. So as it reads, if the information requested must be specifically or specially compiled or created in order to respond to the request, LCTA will be assessed a special service charge as set forth in the state law and board policy. LCTA will be provided with an estimate of special service charge for the compilation prior to the district proceeding with the compilation. Materials which may be duplicated without the district needing to specially compile or create information in response to the request and that are reasonably related to the negotiation process shall be provided without charge. Okay, so that's the language that we're proposing in this instance. And really, once again, it goes back to the language that is outlined, obviously within state statute. Statute 119 allows for this special charge, special service fee, if you will. And then our policy actually requires it as well. And so,
which policy number?
The policy number.
It doesn't matter.
It's,
contract supersedes policy.
8310. Okay. And so that's where we're at right now. Essentially, is that we're looking at this and considering it to be impermissible support of an employee organization. Along those same lines, the next proposal that we're bringing forward is related to temporary duty for LCTA activities. As you can see, we have propose to narrow the language that is applicable related to the approval or the granting of temporary duty. Okay, so once again, going back to 447-501, you know, the prohibition of financial support for employer organizations is paramount here. What we are doing, obviously, when we allow for employees to take temporary duty, we are paying their salary as well as substitute funds to replace them in the classroom. And that is for the benefit of LCTA. So there's been PERC rulings. There's a PERC, one prominent PERC case that's out there that basically says the only time that an employer can allow for this is when it's directly and specifically related to representation activities. And they laid that out in the case as collective bargaining, as discipline, and as grievance procedures. Okay. Basically, everything else they've defined as ancillary union activities and say that it's impermissible for us to provide public funding for those activities. And so as such, what we've done is outlined within this is as permissible as those three things: the negotiation committee, the grievance representation, and the discipline representation. And then we've also indicated in two that the board shall grant leave without pay for those employees to carry out LCT activities as described below. And that's where it specifically addresses the legislative public advocacy, Florida Education Association Delegate Assembly, and LCTA representation on district committees. Okay. In three, basically, it's just outlining and adding in the provision for leave without pay in each of those provisions that relates to the above language. As you can see in the information that I've provided, I've tried to provide requisite exhibit information that specifically relates to the policy, to the relative case law, to the statutory language, and how it interacts with what we're trying to do. Okay. In 3.02H, access to work sites, the board is proposing that we change language to require at least 24 hours notice to the site administrator prior to authorized representatives of the LCTA visiting a school campus. All right, we're also asking that those individuals, when those authorized individuals do come to a school campus, that they check in with the site administrator or designee upon arrival, follow the established protocols, including obtaining appropriate visitor credential before proceeding onto the campus.
So the board wants this.
Yes.
Which board member suggested?
I'm not gonna call out which board member wants this. What I'm saying is that we've met with the
But there is a board
We have
member
an
that brought
executive
this
committee
to you.
meeting, right? In which we've covered all of this information.
I understand.
The board supports.
I'm just asking. You said the board, so I'm asking, there was a
Oh,
board member that
I'm-
brought this to you.
What I'm saying is I'm working in my role as lead negotiator. I'm working on behalf of the superintendent to communicate, the bargaining position of the district.
Okay.
And
So it wasn't the
none
board
of this
that brought
none of this would come forward from me.
it. Of course, but the board did not suggest this part. You said the board, so I'm just trying to indicate.
The board is the
board
entity. The board is the entity that is proposing this.
Thank you for answering the question. We understand.
That's a quick clarifying on this. So as it reads, the intent is essentially that LCTA presence would be the same as any other random visitor. Is that correct? Like, would the LCTA have any additional privileges beyond if a company wants to come speak it?
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I mean, so we will allow access to our school campuses just as we would any other visit.
Yeah, that was the question.
Right.
So yeah.
And limit access just as we would any other visitor. And the reality there is that, if there is a need to limit, then the principal is fully authorized to limit that access.
But we don't
As a
require
person.
every visitor to provide 24-hour notice to site admin.
Well, no, but individuals that come in and want to utilize our space like you are, would be expected to provide adequate notice prior to showing up. So we wouldn't just find out that a representative from LCTA is knocking on the door whenever, or a representative from, AFLAC is knocking on the door when they show up, which is oftentimes what happens.
Clarification, not often, but you do have particular folks that have their views. If you have qualifiers or quantification of that often, I would love to see the data. However, I would like to say that how does this work if there's an issue at the site? That means LCTA can't go there for 24 hours because there's no prior notification.
No, I mean, I think that what in those kinds of circumstances where you have a specific exception, like, okay, an issue that came up at a site in the moment that you would be expected, you would call the site administrator and say, hey, this occurred. I need to be there for representation activities.
Okay. You do realize there's a lot of mitigation that goes on that doesn't lead to representations because we address them sooner than 24 hours.
And so at the end of the day, what we're trying to ensure here is that adequate notice is given to school principals prior to organized visits by the LCTA.
What's definition of organized?
You tell me what.
Well, that kind of makes it different, because I think what he's getting at, and what you're getting at, if a lunch is set up, that's different than Scott showing up to talk on someone one-on-one. Do you agree that those are different,
Yeah,
and should be treated
yeah,
differently?
yeah.
Okay, so we can get into the details.
And you're welcome to counter, and we can work.
Yeah,
with
that's
it.
what I'm just trying
It
to.
doesn't
We're just trying to clarify.
Compare
It doesn't have to be adversarial, guys.
No, I'm
It's just something that is
clarifying
going
question.
to be for the betterment of our operational efficiency. Okay, so that's what we're trying to focus on today, is for the betterment of our operational efficiency. These are things that our principals have asked for us to bring forward to the board. The board supports these things. And so as it stands, that's why we're proposing the language.
No, I clearly
Thank you for the
understand.
clarification.
Since I don't work for you, help me understand the protocol. If like Pam is talking to a colleague at another school and they say, hey, can you come over and talk about it during your lunch? Would she have to go through a process at the other LCS?
Yeah,
You're a visitor at other LCS
Right.
schools, okay.
I would be a visitor at Leon High School the same way that you would, even though I'm the,
Okay.
district human resources director. I check in, do all those things. All right. Which is part of the basis for this ask, is that that's the way we treat everybody within the district. Everyone's expected to check in, follow the normal protocols, give notice if they're coming, right? So this is, the next one is 3.03, and this is with regard to, it's a counter proposal to language that you proposed the last time, or that the LCTA proposed the last time. And so this sort of goes back into the issue of that I just covered a second ago regarding temporary duty. So what we're trying to do is that at the end of the day, we support the development of a supportive workplace. We want employees to be engaged. We want, for LCTA, we believe LCTA plays a role in that process. But at the same point in time, we are prohibited by law from, providing public financial support for employer entities. So what we've tried to do is rewrite this language in a way that is going to allow for the spirit of what you're looking for and the way that it was described to me the last time. And we can try and negotiate through and figure out if we can get to a point that makes this meaningful from your perspective. Essentially what we're going to require is that the lead LCTA faculty representative would be granted temporary duty or leave without pay for up to 2 collaboration days per year. We're thinking that those days need to be scheduled on pre-planning or mid-semester planning days to promote collaboration within LCTA and the instructional body, primarily because otherwise those teachers are busy teaching during that time frame. And it's really not effective at building team, building engagement, building a supportive environment if everyone's teaching and that just that LCTA rep is free. Now, obviously, if they wanted to, if they're participating in representational activities, they could do that as well. But as it relates, we see that as being important that they be on those planning days. The representative would need to provide notice to the principal in advance and include a description of the planned activities that they're planning to do, as well as the stated purpose, and really specifically defining whether or not it constitutes direct representation or ancillary union activities, right? That really tells us whether or not would be authorized to provide for temporary duty on that. And then, you know, the second paragraph once again goes into what they may engage in. They may engage in union activities with other on-site instructional personnel, including culture and climate discussions, staff listening sessions, and education on contractual rights and professional issues. A lot of those are ancillary union issues, so they're not direct representation. We don't have a problem, no issue. We for the most part kept a lot of language that you included in this proposal. With regard to B, monthly labor management meetings, we felt like, you know, ultimately we support the collaborative relationship between the site rep and the principal. But I think that our only concern was that the shall language basically becomes, it has the potential to become burdensome. It becomes to say, okay, you must do this every single month when there may be things that come. And so we support the language. We feel like May is more appropriate.
Is it possible to meet and just say we don't need to meet about anything?
Sure.
And then that way it
100%.
shall.
But the problem is that the principal may not have an opportunity during a given month to meet. And they may say, you know, that, okay, well, you get to the end of the month and it's like, well, we haven't got a chance to meet and I'm booked. I'm available next week. But next week I would miss this whole month and be in violation of the contract. So what we're trying to do here is to comply with the spirit of what you're requesting, but really say, hey, you know, the principal may do this as opposed to shall do this.
It sounds like you're saying that you want some flexibility on what was the intent of meeting on a monthly basis to make sure that there's compliance, but the way that it's written in May, that means that there doesn't have to be a meeting at all.
Okay, I mean,
I'm clarifying.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that, yeah, we agree with the spirit of it. We feel like it's that working with the union to have conversations about issues at the schools is a positive thing. It creates positive employee relations, which is what our goal is.
So,
but I do at the same time agree as well that, you know, with the load of that that's placed on both the teachers and site rep being a teacher and the principals, it may not always be possible to do.
Understood. I just want to make sure that in terms of a counter.
If you can come up with language that'll, you know,
right,
help us get there, we're open to that. Okay. All right, with regard to 7.02 pre and post planning. Now, this is another one of those compliance issues that we're going to address, and that is that I think the legislature has basically said that the defining of district calendars is the prerogative of the board and the superintendent. Okay. And so with that being said, they've also indicated that those subjects are not, you know, that aspect is not subject to collective bargaining. So what we're doing here is we're proposing that we take out the aspects of this provision that relate to the calendar, right? Because It's the prerogative of management to set the calendar. Now, in discussion with the board, we didn't have an issue. The board didn't have an issue at all. Superintendent, board, none of them had an issue at all with the proposal that would allow for 5 pre-planning days and 2 days of planning following each grading period. Okay. But what we do have a problem with really is negotiating that aspect of it because it's a function of the calendar. So that being said, we have sort of agreed to take into consideration your request for that when the calendar is being set. And we're also proposing, additional language here that would help support what is being asked of the district as it relates to pre-planning, specifically around training. Okay, so I'll go through the changes here. In accordance with state law, board retains exclusive authority to establish the district's academic calendar, including start and end dates, holidays, teacher work days, planning days. Pre-planning activities shall be determined annually by the board and communicated in advance to the district calendar. Pre-planning generally begins 5 working days before semester start. However, the board may adjust the schedule at its discretion. The purpose of design pre-planning days or designated pre-planning days is to provide necessary and required training for employees, facilitate classroom preparation and planning for the instruction and evaluation. That's regular, the same language as we had before. This is our ask. Okay. Although it may be appropriate to use some portion of pre-planning or post-planning to accommodate schools' program needs or district, state, federal mandates, the amount of pre-planning time utilized for non-instructional activities shall not exceed 1/2 of the allotted pre-planning time for the school year. All right. So essentially, we recognize that during pre-planning, the teachers receive an hour lunch for a break for lunch, which essentially puts us at 6.5 hours per day. We're asking that each day of pre-planning, regardless of however many days pre-planning on the calendar, receive half of that time to be able to ensure that appropriate training takes place regarding the numerous things that have been emphasized to us over the course of these bargaining sessions related to training, not the least of which are evaluations and safety and all of those things. We have to have time to be able to address those things and essentially the rest of the language is this in this paragraph is the same or similar. Basically, any additional meetings called for instructional staff shall be voluntary and should not be considered individual planning time, right? Or shall not be considered non-individual planning time. Then we'll go forward down to B to address the part where you guys where the union was asking for 1 day dedicated to individual planning, 1 day dedicated to district required planning. Once again, go back to that and say, okay, we didn't have any issues with that at all. It's just the issue is having it memorialized in the contract because it is the purview of the board to decide the calendar. So you can see the language that is proposed there. And then we're also reiterating D. We'd like to see current contract language in D. So we don't see a need for taking that provision out.
Clarifying, is it the intent of the district to have a mapped out pre-planning schedule based off of this? Because there is district overlap on school overlap, on ESE overlap, on pre-K overlap, on this overlap that takes place, which makes it very difficult to even meet the intent of the current language. So how does the district plan on meeting the 50-50 mark?
I mean, is there a direct plan at this point in time? No, there's not a direct plan at this time. What would be planned would be that we would have a district calendar that indicated which days we're planning, which days were pre-planning, which days were, post-planning for grading periods. And then ultimately we would know the confines within which we work.
But the
And I think
silos
that-
don't.
so-
That's the issue.
Say it again.
The silos don't. Meaning
Well,
there are people scheduling
I-
mandatory meetings here that the other person has no idea about. So until the district has a plan to kind of figure that part out as a part of this, it's really difficult for us to agree to anything, just giving you context.
No, 100%. I agree. In any large district, you're going to have things happening all over the place, right? Silos that take place. I don't know that I think
It is a
we're
manager,
happy to
right.
take a look at that and
Mhm.
try and figure it out. But there's too many moving parts, to be honest with you, to have one specific schedule that's outlined for that covers just 5 days that meets everyone's needs.
So you're saying that there is no way to meet the intent of the language that you currently have because there's so much overlap that you wouldn't be able to. So until there's a way to actually codify it on paper, there's no plan to even meet the language. So that's
What
just
gives
something
you
for
the
you to
impression that we don't
discuss.
have, what gives you the impression we don't intend to meet the language as it's currently written? I mean,
Because we have language now and we encounter issues that come up with district level meetings that certain people at the school site do not need to do, but others do. And so principals have, because it's site-based, put their schedules together based off of what they want to get done. And they don't know where every other person's being pulled. So that requires some coordination, advance notice to the site principals, what are the mandatory meetings, how that all works out. And to say that there's so many moving parts, we're not necessarily able to do it. There's a way to do it. It's just,
Scott.
we, for peace of mind and to understand how it would be implemented, we kind of want to know what that roadmap's going to look like so that it's not whack-a-mole, it's on paper and we have an understanding.
I understand your ideal setting, right? But in a large district that has as many different things going on as we do, the fact that we've been in compliance with this aspect, and literally, I think we've had one grievance over this language in the 4 years that I've been managing labor relations. And even in that situation, it was very, very close. I think we may have had to pay a person half an hour of time because of overlap. And so to say we're not complying or not following the spirit of the language is just not accurate.
Well,
But
I
I
don't think
get where you're
that
coming
people actually know what the language is, and that's part of it. We've had ACOMP for a while and we still can't even get on the same page with that. So I guess my thing is, how do we? Implementation is very important because it reduces the district's frustration, it reduces the employee's frustration, it reduces the ability or the necessity to respond. So there's team leads, there's program specialists, there's all these different folks that are being pulled in different directions. And I just would like for you to understand that to say that it's so many moving parts, we can't say that what it looks like or the process. I'm just asking you to go back and think about it.
I'm not saying and I indicated that we would go back and think about it.
Mhm.
I don't
And
think
when we
anything I
counter
had
a little more
basically
of it.
said we weren't going to think about it. It's just a very tough thing to think about and find a solution for. And so we'll work on it. But I will point out that we've not been in violation of this provision. It's very difficult, however, to get done what we need to get done within the limitation of 12 hours. That's just the reality. And if we do switch to a district calendar that says that we have 5 days for pre-planning, it will be almost impossible to do everything that we need to do within just 12 hours, which is why we're asking for the additional time to be able to accomplish what you've also asked us to do, which is provide high-level training to our teachers related to, all of these various things that are coming out.
Do you know the difference is only like 3 hours?
I understand.
Okay, so 12 is not that far off, is my point. One other question, does that mean that orientation is considered part of the 12 hours? Because that's not planning time. How does that factor?
We can
into it?
discuss this at a later point in time. That's not.
I'm just
for us to debate
Gaining
today.
understanding on what your intent is. I appreciate it.
7.07 is the next. This is in response to your administrative testing. And so in 7.07, we agree with A. We have changed B slightly to indicate that training for testing, it's really just rewording for more clarity. Because I think if you read that, I think that, you know, when I would imagine that when you guys looked at it and didn't make a change, it was primarily because of that. There's no substantive issue, but it doesn't read well at all. So basically what we did was change it to make it more understandable. Really the main substantive change that we put forward is related to D, and that is that administration of testing, right? Every effort will be made to distribute duties, roles, and responsibilities associated with the administration of student testing equitably among staff members whenever possible. So the reality of it is based on what's happening at a school and the priorities of learning in those schools. You know, it is important that we keep teachers with their students for as long as possible. So what that ends up happening, like especially in the core areas, what happens is that, you know, sometimes that means that certain teachers are administering testing more often, right? But what we've committed to is to say, okay, we'll do our best to take that into consideration and distribute those things equitably as we move forward. As far as testing locations and you know, tests that impact 20% less of the population and limiting the function, the space and the functionality of our schools, we're not able to agree with that language, primarily because it limits our flexibility to administer district operations. Okay, and you know, we only have so much space. If we had unlimited space, unlimited access to space, it would be a different story. It's just not feasible as it is for effective operations to agree with E or F. All right, the next topic is 10.01 health and safety. So this was the section in which you guys, the union was proposing a specific range or specific temperature threshold under which action should be taken, right? So what we have agreed to, or what we put forward in our response here is we agree ultimately that this is an important issue, right? And that maintaining a safe and comfortable learning environment and working environment is important for students and instructional personnel. And to support the objective, the district will make reasonable efforts to maintain indoor classroom temperatures within the thermal comfort ranges. Nothing in the section shall be construed as guarantee of precise indoor temperatures at all times. However, the district agrees to operate in good faith and make reasonable efforts to ensure classroom environments align with recognized industry standards set forth for thermal comfort. The main issue is that we cannot control when an air conditioner is going to malfunction. We can respond accordingly. And I think our maintenance teams do a pretty good job of responding on a timely basis, even when you have repeated issues with age of buildings and things along those lines. It is important to note one of the exhibits that I've included is our standard for occupied space. Our standard is 74 degrees. That's what it's set at for occupied space. For unoccupied space, it's at 85 degrees. You know, and here I got this directly from Rob McLean in our maintenance division, right? So, you know, we're going to do our best. We recognize the importance of this kind of a subject, but it is not something that we're willing to agree to set a strict threshold in contract.
Can you please define comfortable?
Can I?
It says comfortable,
you?
safe and comfortable learning and working environment. So what is comfortable as defined?
I don't know, can you define?
It's not my language. That's why I'm
We
asking.
defined it with
I think it's pretty common language to say, you know, comfort is something that everyone really agrees. I don't think that we have a problem with a set threshold that says if it goes above or below this threshold on occasion, you know, this room right now, could be an issue because we got 60 people in here, right? Where, you know, the air conditioner struggles, not built for 60 people, so maybe the heat goes up a little bit. That doesn't mean there's a problem, right? So
I guess my question is like, so is it an individual comfort? Is it a set standard? So like, for example, if someone's going through menopause, comfort is a different definition.
I would argue that if you want to define comfort for all intents and purposes, that you're welcome to counter back language that specifically defines comfort. You can put in the definitions if you like.
Can we look at the modification of LCS energy management runtime and set points as end times in classrooms, 1 hour after dismissal? The extended day folks are there for until 3:45. That would leave the air on only until 2:50. So there would be an additional hour without air.
We do run time requests.
Yes.
Yeah, the rooms in which PD are using the air.
I'm talking about, but at every school, if high schools aren't running an EP program, but their staff is on site until 4 o'clock every day, and it's an hour after dismissal, which is 1:50, would that not require the air to be on for an additional hour?
If
That
there's a specific reason for people to be on campus during that time.
our contract says we're supposed to be on campus until 3:45.
Until it's okay, so you're saying that at Leon High School, they turned the air I'm not so this right here is just, this came from
Yes.
Ron McQueen and the maintenance department. When they indicate, at 1 hour before the start time, then what I'm anticipating that to mean is we have times that we're anticipated to occupy the building as a start time, not the start time of the bell ringing. And so if it is, I can clarify that. That's the impression that I got from talking to Mr. McQueen, was that these standards are what they apply. And it relates to when they expect the place to be occupied, right? So it's not set from the bell time. It's based on when they expect the place to be occupied. And so I can, once again, go back and get that clarified and bring it back to you the next time.
Mhm. Yeah.
Make a note to do.
And just as a point of clarification for our language, some of the stuff was to, about notices and different things was to ensure that, yes, the staff does come out. I'll give an example. Riley Elementary this year, they went out probably 3 times for the same air conditioned system. And each time they left, they thought they had fixed it, but it never really changed the air that was flowing. So as a managerial thing, I just think that it would be good to, what is the definition of fixed before someone leaves, so that it has to be functioning so that people can be in the environment to do their jobs, and maybe whatever that double checking part is, rather than just the replacement of a part or something.
And the language that you feel like is important, feel free to counter. From our perspective, the commitment on the level of detail, especially on things like maintenance and air conditioners of units that may be, in some cases 20 years old, other cases 5 years old. It's not something we can necessarily guarantee.
No, I'm
Right? So
not asking.
that's why one of the reasons why we're not willing to put those guarantees into.
I guess feedback loops as to maybe what the outcome was if it didn't, and how that's addressed maybe. But and another clarifying point is, it says unoccupied areas, media centers. Media centers are usually occupied. There's a media specialist in them. So them at 80 degrees and everybody else at 74.
Once again, this
sure.
is an example of it's an exhibit. It's not language that we're pushing forward to you. So it's intended to show you that the comfort ranges that we do currently maintain. But no.
But I guess that's what you just said, you currently maintain. And anyway.
Is the 80 degrees because of all the votes?
Yes. Yeah, unoccupied refers to.
Weekend wise or something.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks for the
Occupied
clarification.
refers to unoccupied.
Oh, I got that.
10.01 related to school climate, separate type of climate in this circumstance. So we had a lot of discussion around this at our executive session with the board, and this is something that we care a lot about. We feel like it's important that, I made the statement earlier, that it is important that we have supportive, engaging work environments. That, that we have leadership that engages in that. And prioritizes the engagement of our staff, satisfaction of our staff. However, we're hesitant to approach it in a way that's been proposed in the language. We don't feel like creating a bad boy list, if you will, of engagement offenders is the right way to go in this circumstance. We feel like the more appropriate way to manage this would be to create a way to assess and measure the level of engagement and satisfaction, if you will, for schools across the district. It's specifically for employees, right? What does that look like? We certainly don't know at this point in time. So we're not willing to memorialize that within the contract. But what we are willing to do is to commit to creating an assessment and to looking at that assessment and sort of building off of it. Okay. Also, we think that the emphasis should be on rewarding and celebrating, if you will, recognizing those schools that have really, really great workplace culture, that really focus on the whole employee relations deal, because we feel like that's going to be the more effective way to approach this from a buy-in perspective, right? Because if we ultimately go back and say, okay, you're in trouble because your folks are not engaged enough or satisfied enough, you're not going to have people that are all in to try and improve things, right? So we want to really focus on the positive aspects of culture, rewarding the positive aspects of culture, and not creating a list that's going to quite honestly offend some people and feel like they're not going to be bought into the idea. So we want to just focus on the positive. And we think it's a good idea. We think it's a really good idea to measure this and take actions to improve it.
So if the districts can focus on the positive and ratings come back that are negative, then what is the district doing? Focusing only on the positive? How does that get addressed then? Because it's not nowhere in our language does it say create a bad boy list. And I'm just not sure how you,
Climate intervention school designation.
yeah.
That tells me that if you're a climate intervention school designation, that's what that.
Well, when 60% of the staff, which we've had at schools at times, are dissatisfied because of the culture and climate, then what is the district's way of dealing with that?
I think that we've stated that we plan to assess and take action.
So you'll make your own bad boy list.
I didn't say that either. What I'm saying is that, so I think that action planning involves, when you take action, you look at, what the assessment tells you. You evaluate the results and you put measures in place to try and incrementally improve engagement.
That's exactly what I said,
place,
but you
right?
called it a bad boy
But
list.
no, what I'm calling it, when you say, that's the impression that people get. When you say the climate intervention school, that's the impression people get.
So my question
And it's
is,
not just from me.
who's the impression? Is it of the leaders of those places where maybe there's negative feedback, or what's the?
I'll let you make those interpretations, Scott.
Well, you're the one talking to them. That's why I asked you. So, don't we learn from negative feedback? Meaning that if you take an assessment and you don't do well on it, then that's when corrective action as a teacher and reflection goes into it to improve upon a situation. So.
What I don't understand is when I say that we will look at the outcome, the results of the assessment,
Right.
and that we will action plan so that we're able to promote incremental improvement. That's what I said.
You
That's
have,
exactly what
I
you're
know.
talking about.
you have to understand how everyone else is hearing this. What they're hearing is the district doesn't want to know where maybe some hot spots are.
That's not true.
No, I know that's not true because I've worked with you guys on these things, but the way that it's presented as a bad boy list and the intent of LCTA and the employees of this district is to catch people. That's not
So
what
the-
this
the-
intent is.
The closest analogy would be to our differentiated accountability schools, where it's like, okay, now we're gonna go in and do all these different things because they have the lower scores. That's not the impression that we're wanting to create in this situation. We want to improve engagement. We want to improve that supportive, positive environment, period. We also want to focus on the positive recognition aspects as opposed to those individuals that are below 30% or whatever it is that whatever your threshold is.
Two things, we'll move on. One thing, does that mean when you find the positive things, you're going to develop a best practices kind of portfolio and sites will then implement those best
That's a great idea.
practices? That would be one piece. The second thing is when it comes to only doing it annually, the reason why progress monitoring is in place is so that you don't wait until the big assessment and then find out that there are gaps. So by doing it just annually, that would be something that I would think the district would like to know as well. So that's why we were not just on an annual basis. I wanted to give our rationale.
And I think that obviously this would be a new process. Right now, we do a climate survey that addresses everyone, not just. So we would start with this process and then expand it as we saw fit. And if at some point in time, we felt like we had a best practice, a one best way to do this, we might not be adverse to putting it into contract language.
I
But at
heard
this point in
Kim,
time, because we don't know what our best practice could be, or should be, or will be, we're not willing to memorialize it in contract language.
well, I just know that there are a bunch of A and B schools for the past 5 years recognized just this past Tuesday at the school board where Kim McFarland was talked about how wonderful she does. But the question would be, are her practices replicated around the district then? And if not, then why not?
That's a good question.
In your experience, would you find any high performing schools with a bad climate survey?
You know what? Yes, you could. I've been in a school where it was toxic, but yet still high performing because there were a lot of A-type teachers that knew what their primary focus was, the kids. But they were micromanaged down and disenfranchised and wasn't necessarily super positive. So it can. Thank you.
We're ready to move on.
Once again, we would like to focus on the positive.
Move forward.
So, security cameras. So we recognize what you've brought forward with regard to security cameras. However,
You recognized it so much you crossed it off.
what
They were excited.
what we do believe is that there is a diminished expectation of privacy in public school workplaces, right? Classrooms being open to students and administrators and parents, they're not typically seen as private areas or private spaces. And so we disagree that there should be an expectation of privacy that would shield our employees from the use of security cameras in any of our environments. However, we do recognize that this is a sensitive issue. And, you know, we have, if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, proposed a policy that related to use of security cameras. Wallace Knight, who's our director of policy, as you guys know. Wallace, do you mind speaking to that and what that was about at the time?
Right. So a couple of years ago, 2022, I believe the district proposed some language related to security cameras in class. At that time, the legislature started a pilot program in Broward County, and it's actually in statute. It is 1003.574.
Say it again slower, sorry.
1003.574. And it was beginning with the 2021-2022 school year. The video cameras in public school classrooms pilot program was created for a period of 3 years. The legislature at that time identified too in that language the purpose and the reason for going through that 3-year period of the pilot program. So the district's position right now with the cameras, we understand that this policy has been in flux. That's the reason why it was in flux. For that particular reason, that pilot program was about putting cameras in self-contained classrooms because of some issues within those classrooms. So we would still like to take more time and allow the board to consider creating a policy related to those security cameras that mirrors some of the language that was included in the statute for that pilot program as well.
The board has indicated through our executive sessions that they support the idea of looking at this and potentially bringing forward another policy sometime soon. And then ultimately, you know, that through the public comment period that, you know, the LCTA and members of the LCTA would have an opportunity to provide their input on the creation of that policy.
Right. And to add to what Brett was saying as well, we understand and we can still continue to communicate and talk about those things, such as understanding that, you know, the cameras being evaluated without someone's knowledge or consent. We understand that those things are true concerns, and language addressing those things can be addressed.
Is a possible intermediate solution just to emphasize the discipline for recording inappropriately as opposed to kind of this language?
Well, I mean, taking a look at it, I mean, it just says employees will be notified before a camera comes in. Apparently that's too much to ask for. No covert, hidden or unannounced cameras, that's too much to ask for. Video cameras, recording equipment that's placed in view of, not placed in view of restrooms and other areas, too much to ask for. You know, I guess my concern is, it seems like, and this is not what's necessarily happening, but I just want perceptions wise, okay? That the district wants us not to have the right to negotiate things that are working conditions and that we should go through district policy instead. So what's the point of a contract, which should then all just be policy, right? So if our purpose here is to negotiate language within the contract that is reasonable, it seems reasonable to then have some reasonable language that we can agree with. Maybe not everything, but just not cameras at restrooms, not like, you know, a notice on the wall, you are under surveillance right now, things like that. That doesn't seem like too much to ask for. And the reason that I caution the fact of let's go through policy, and this is not to say that this will be what happens, but we've already been down this road once before, 2022. And there was no policy that was passed. So now there is nothing governing cameras in Leon County schools right now. And in lieu of that, we would like to negotiate reasonable camera language.
Right. And if I could respond to that, again, the legislature thought that this was a nuanced situation as well. And
Mhm.
that is why they created the 3-year pilot program to test that out in Broward County. We understand completely the concerns and some of the points that you just mentioned, the private spaces such as the restrooms. Those things are addressed in the language that was proposed in the statute. So I think, with time, and now that that pilot program has concluded, there may be some additional directions that we get from the legislature as a way to move forward. And taking our time with that, as the legislature did, I think it would be the best approach for the district as well.
And your comments related to wanting to have language, we hear you. And I think that what the board is hearing, what the board wants to do is to say, okay, we don't really even know what our approach is right now as it relates to this. So let us gather those facts in the form of a policy and then we'll negotiate.
Yeah, but we
But
don't.
we're
need
not
to wait
we're
for
not
you
gonna
to
do
get
it
policy.
piecemeal.
This isn't piecemeal. This is us right here, right
There's,
now.
there's definitely certain aspects. So if we went through this thing, there's certain aspects that we could agree to. There's a lot that we couldn't.
And so
And so-
a counter should include the things that you can agree to, so that we are finding some
And
common
what I'm
ground.
telling you, I understand your perspective on what you think our counter should.
No, I'm not saying
contain.
that. You said
What
it
I,
was agreeable.
what I'm
language,
saying
not
is
me.
that, what I'm saying is that we want to make sure that we understand the totality of the circumstances before we put forth any proposed information or.
So if somebody's assaulting me, I have to wait for someone else to go through a pilot program and come up with a policy or a state statute about not being assaulted, when we really know that you shouldn't be assaulted. No one should have to be. And we could make that language in that particular case. But we're not going to because of the other stuff. Just perspective. I'm not saying what you should do. That is your choice. I'm just saying that in context of the timelines and things, there is a solution that's much closer and more.
Okay, so the statute in which you refer to, because the 3 years are up, it's expired, so therefore there's nothing regulating these self-contained classrooms, Florida law wise.
But there was, but also only in Broward and only in self-contained. So does it have anything to do with what's going on here now, I guess is what, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes, I would say it does because, again, when we're talking about putting cameras in the classroom, the reason why those self-contained classrooms, it was an issue. Of course, you have students that are nonverbal, and the intent of just putting them in those self-contained classrooms could have been considered discriminatory. So, and when we're looking at the whole picture of things, I think it definitely applies.
Was there so this expired right for 3 years, was there like a conclusion or a write-up is like, this worked out really well, we love it? Or this was a big flop, didn't go well, that's why we let it expire, or just legislative changed and.
Right,
now,
so,
there was like a conclusion to why we did it for, well, it's not your county.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay, got it. Okay, you can go on.
All right, so we're moving on to 11.02, employee discipline. In this circumstance, we agree pretty much with everything that you have proposed with regard to, with the exception of within 11.02. I guess it would technically be B if my formatting was correct.
Mhm.
That last little line where it says, and would not impact evaluation processes or reappointment processes. Right, because I think in any one of those circumstances, a verbal warning or counseling memorandum may have an impact on evaluation, may have an impact on reappointment. And we're not willing to say it won't.
Okay, we'll just talk about that one.
And so otherwise we didn't have any other issue. With regard to the use of recordings and disciplinary action, this goes hand in hand with the video camera section. at this point in time, we're not willing to accept or counter your language. We would like to try and develop our policy, our stance on this issue prior to negotiating any language on this front. Now, it should not come as a surprise, however, but in my informal polling, there's very, very few districts that actually have language that addresses this. So I think that to say, oh, everyone, you know, we're behind on this front, really very few, if any, have language related to security cameras. And if you can point them out, please tell me, because in my search wasn't able to find.
Okay.
Removal from the classroom. So the language that you have proposed, we've basically just built onto. In our language, in the event that a student makes a formal allegation against a teacher, which could deliberately damage the teacher's professional reputation, lead to loss of employment, or jeopardize their Florida educator certificate, which is subsequently determined through formal investigations to be malicious or knowingly false, a teacher may formally request that the site administrator remove the subject from the teacher's classroom roster in accordance with the provisions of Article 10.10b. Some additional qualifiers in there. Don't really have much to do with that.
These are just which qualifiers are excluded. What was the concern of adding?
Well, this specific language directly relates to a statute. The statute is 1006.09, and we really just tried to align the language with the statute. That was the primary thing. With regard to the next area, student records, this is an issue that we've gone back and forth the last 2 years. Right? We've pounded away on a lot of this same language in the past. And just as in the past, it's not something that a lot of we've made the concessions on this language that we feel like we could make. Ultimately, it's within the management's prerogative of the district to set district-wide protocols for access to the information. And we feel like, quite honestly, that we've done that within the language that has been currently agreed to after 2 years of negotiating. So at this point, we are not in agreement to include all of the additional parameters that you are requesting that we include in terms of setting up a district-wide program.
I think that we're seeing in school sites a real gap in understanding who students are because of school changes. Right, they go from home zone to school choice, and then records and focus don't transfer over appropriately, or between year to year with how things have been logged between one person to another. And then when it comes to the time of having those conversations about NCSS processes or other behavioral management tactics in the classroom, the teachers are lacking the information to make those decisions appropriately or to enable best practices with a student because they are unaware of a previous history of the student. That's where this derives from.
But the current language gives those teachers the right to that information. I don't understand. I guess
So
I'm just
it's-
missing what you're saying.
Focus is
that they're
not,
not receiving.
focus is not working the way like that, where you say, yep, you get to see all of Johnny's information, but Johnny came from another school, cannot be seen on certain levels of focus, which is why we broke down that there might need to be a review in what those levels are. And
Well, I
those
think that-
certain authorizations in focus can see it, yep, but then as you get less authorizations, you can't see what you would be able to see if that kid would have been at your school site for the entirety of their school career.
I think we're happy to look into those issues, but what you're describing really just sounds like more of a breakdown in the functionality of focus, which you and I discussed an issue with that earlier. We recognize that there are breakdowns in the functionality of focus
Yeah,
that need to be addressed. We don't, however, feel like that the breakdown in the functionality of focus would then necessitate the need for all of this additional language within our contract.
So the intent of this language was to help review the breakdown in focus. And I know it's got a lot of words to say that four words I just said. That was the initial intent, is that as new teachers are boarded or as roles change within school sites, that everyone's set up appropriately to see all of the appropriate records for that student. Because there's times when teachers have gone to see records, they're not there, but then they go to another person that maybe has a department head status and they can see those records, but they're not even the teacher of record.
So I think that we're happy to investigate this. We just
Yeah.
don't feel like the additional language is necessary. And so, as we continue to go forward, we'll dig into this a little bit more and maybe refine it down to maybe what there may be, what language there may be a need for. But in terms of adding, all of this additional language is just, unnecessary in our opinion.
But just as a perspective, is that the reason why the language is there is because there's a breakdown and you've already admitted that there is. And so the language is to create a standard so there is no breakdown and some communication between both groups. We just had this year at Cobb where I think Jimmy Williams had to go to the school side for something and there was discussion. And he said, no, you should have access to the threat assessment if you're a teacher of record, so but teachers didn't. It's just the icon. They don't know exactly what it is. So there was something that had to happen at that school specifically to open up certain things. This language is to make sure that those things don't happen. And as much as I know we've worked on a lot of things, and we do push a lot of things across the finish line and improve stuff, the issue of the contract is to make sure that it's guaranteed, not as wait until it falls apart and there's a breakdown and have to have those discussions. So
We've negotiated this
understand.
language
We
2
will-
years in a row, and the language says.
I understand. I'm gonna
individual
finish my
records for the
sentence.
school
So,
year shall be
as I
available.
understand that your position, we will take a look at it, continue the conversation with you. And I know you don't think that there's an issue, but as I said, your employees still don't feel like they have the necessary information. And the final part is, you used to have a cumulative folder. I could go walk in the office. I didn't check it until after the first 3 weeks because I wanted the kids to kind of figure out who they wanted to be in my classroom. And I always told them, you can kind of make yourself new. Like, you were the kid that didn't get your homework done, you can be the kid to get your homework done this year, whatever you need to do. But in that cumulative folder, I saw everything all the way back to kindergarten as a 5th grade teacher. And that helped me understand that child. And the concern that we all have is that we used to have those rights. And now it's based off of well, you're going to target a child, not support them. So that really says more about what maybe the intent of the district or thought of the district about the mindset of the teachers are, rather than understanding that let's set a shared standard of what our expectations are and what information can be used for to mitigate issues in the classroom. So we will review it, we will counter, and we just hope that you take a look at it and understand our position.
Sir.
Before you go forward, can I go back to cameras for a second? And so I quickly was able to find 4 school districts with camera language. So you would want to write them down: Martin, Indian River, Okaloosa, and Clay. And Clay has they exclude them from the classroom. The board may install video cameras on board property and vehicles to exclude restrooms, classrooms, offices, staff, faculty lounges. And then actually the Martin language, I think, is kind of what we were proposing. It's fairly short. They have to be notified, signs have to be posted. They're not installed in classrooms without notice to the teacher. They're only for security reasons. They can't be used to evaluate, and they can't be used in discipline unless it's supported by other evidence.
So Clay, Martin, Okaloosa, where else?
Martin, Indian River, Okaloosa, and Clay. The package I just read is Martin.
Okay, so I mean, as
So
I
how about-
indicated, I
yeah.
think that
So it's out there.
the board is not against ever having language.
I know
They
you
just
said you
they
could
want
find
to
any
figure
examples
out
like
what
maybe
our
4.
approach is before we agree to language.
That's fine. I
So
was just-
having this will definitely help to maybe mold how we create that language on a move forward basis. So the next provision was 12.12, 1, 2. This was related to notice of expiration. And, so I'd like to point out that, so we as a district already notify both the employee. We directly from Angie Albritton to the employee, I think 3 times in the year before they're getting certified.
Okay, so we're
And then-
verifying.
and
what
then
we talked
also-
about before.
We're also notifying the administrator as well 3 times during that time frame. So that's 6 times total. But ultimately, it's our position that the certification of employees is the professional responsibility of the employee, right? And the minimum employer requirement that all teachers have is that they hold a Florida Educator Certificate in the area or course that they're assigned to teach. And so what we're saying is to support compliance, the district will make every effort to proactively notify teachers. We'll continue to do what we're already doing. But that ultimately that is their responsibility. We do not agree that there should be any kind of grievance process associated with whether or not an individual was notified of their own personal professional responsibility.
The only
So
reason why,
we've proposed language that we feel like is appropriate.
the only reason why we put a grievance process procedure in is because you often say, what's the resolution if the contract language is not resolved? So that's the reason why it was included.
And I honestly like it if it was something that was a responsibility of ours. Yeah,
Well-
I would say, hey, that's good.
And here's where I think, just, it's a shared responsibility, because they're taking money away from us because people aren't certified or out of field in a lot of different places. So there is a responsibility of the district if it's a funding mechanism that impacts students. And plus, it's also a destabilizing factor within the classroom of the district because we have turnover. So it's just trying to work with each other to communicate and facilitate for mutual benefit. It's not saying that it's not a professional responsibility. It's just there is a benefit for both parties by working together.
And it's for that reason, honestly, that I think that we're willing to say, okay, we'll put language that's probably otherwise not necessary into this contract that says we'll make every effort to proactively notify these educators like we already do 6 times in the year before their recertification. And so, that's where we are with the language at this point. I feel like it's a good, meeting point, if you will, on this issue.
Okay,
I wonder if we could just spot check a couple, because I believe absolutely what you're saying is for things getting caught up in spam or something, right? And so I wonder if Angie, we could just pick out a few people that you emailed and we'll check, like Mel was one in the past year, and let's just see if the emails arrive. Yeah. I'll follow up with. Just because if
Coordinate
you're,
with,
yeah, if you're going through the effort to do it, we want to make sure it's arriving if it's getting caught up for some other reason, that's all.
we're happy to do that.
Thanks.
All right, the next article that we are looking to address. This is a revisitation from 2 years ago.
can you just give us the reasoning behind it? You don't need to
Once
read.
again, yeah, I'd be happy to
Okay.
change it.
That way-
so
that way we don't-
basically, the reasons behind it is because the statute changed.
Mhm.
And it is no longer subject to collective bargaining
Mhm.
according to the statute.
Okay.
It is ultimately the purview of the district superintendent and school board to set procedures related to evaluations. And as you can see, it's outlined here in the second line, 447.209, right? The district school superintendent shall establish a system for evaluating the performance of duties and responsibilities for all instructional and administrative supervisory personnel employed by the school district, including the system design, structure, and content of the evaluation system, the procedures established by the district school superintendent set by the standards of service to be offered by to the public within the meaning of 447.209 and are not subject to collective bargaining. That is outlined in 1012.34.
Okay.
It is clear as day in the contract language. Now, what we are, sorry, clear as day in the statute. Now, what we recognize is that we have an obligation to negotiate the impact of these changes, right? Which has been broadly sort of interpreted to mean sort of the appeals process and sort of some of the procedures associated with how it's going to be done. But and what we've done is included language that specifically gets at those things. In the first section, we basically said, okay, the evaluation process is the purview of the district. But then we say, okay, the procedures will all be laid out in leads in our employee guide or teacher's guide to the lead system. Everything will be sort of memorialized there with regard to the process. When a change becomes necessary, we're agreeing to present those changes, though we haven't had changes in some time. I think just changes to the system that's been utilized, but not the actual instrument. Those changes would be submitted to you guys as the union to take a look at, and then we would follow the normal procedure, which it requires approval by the DOE for any changes to occur. And then we are laying forth within this contract an appeals process that we feel like will be effective in the circumstances, and we feel like this is proposed language that we're willing to negotiate with you as it relates to this whole subject matter. And so, that piece, that the appeals process is really the most pertinent aspect of what we got here. But of course, if there's other aspects that you feel like, impact terms and conditions of employment that are not the purview of the board, then we're willing to evaluate those and we'll negotiate those as would be appropriate.
Okay.
So speaking to the language in the appeal piece, I mean, basically what we're saying is that an employee may file a procedural appeal related to the application of the evaluation procedures outlined in the guide. This appeal must be submitted in writing to the employee supervising administrator within 30 days of the event giving rise to the concern. If the employee if the issue remains unresolved following supervisory review, the employee may submit an appeal of the unresolved procedural issue to the evaluation review panel. The evaluation review panel shall be comprised of 2 active classroom teachers appointed by the Leon Classroom Teachers Association and 3 representatives appointed by the superintendent. The panel shall review the procedural appeal, applying the established evaluation procedures and considering the relevant individual circumstances. The panel will make, that's supposed to be the panel will make an determination based on the consensus of the majority of the group. If the panel sustains the teacher's concern related to the procedural error in the area of instructional practice, the panel will impose a resolution by majority consensus. If the panel sustains the teacher's concern related to an issue of student learning objectives, the panel shall, by majority consensus, recommend an alternative resolution to the superintendent. Okay. With regard to the last part of 13 was 13.02. That's annual contracts. We've proposed that we would move that to a different section, as it specifically is more related to how we manage the transfer process for non-reappointed teachers. So we're proposing that we would move that to what will be 14 as we go forward.
And just as a point of clarification for everyone, this is a procedural error, not necessarily that the evaluation rating is discrepancy.
I mean, I think that whatever you're into, I think that this aspect, I'm not looking to split hairs. What we're looking
I'm
at,
asking for clarification.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think that what we would be willing to consider is any appeal associated with that evaluation, that the person would have the opportunity to articulate what their concern is. Obviously, if there's procedural issues, then that would be addressed. But if there's things that may not technically be considered procedural. We're not saying they're not appropriate for the appeals process.
Okay.
This is a intended to be a, you know, a resolution process, if you will.
I appreciate the clarity because I wanted to just, it sounded like if, for example, you're supposed to get feedback within 10 days if it's not effective or highly effective, and it doesn't post until May when you get your non-reappointment letter, well, that would be a procedural error that has taken place. But if it is somebody who wears jeans on Tuesdays and the principal doesn't want it, and that's professional responsibilities dinged, you're not a professional because of whatever culture, climate on school, that's not procedural, that's someone's evaluation of that situation. But meanwhile, the reason why I bring that up is because Kim will let people wear jeans 5 days a week, other people have different perspectives, that kind of stuff. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the intent, so I do appreciate your response.
I mean, I think that the intent is to try and create a legitimate appeal process by which we can look at all of these circumstances, and if things are happening that shouldn't be happening, correct them.
Related, unrelated, are, when you say Article 14, we're looking at the article titled vacancies and transfers, but if we agree to the structure that was proposed prior, that would now become Article 15, and we would adjust from there.
I think that it's, well, I thought well, we can nail down that. I think that we
Okay.
had adjusted for that.
Because we have new 10,
Yeah.
current 10, 11, 12,
13.
but then that would be 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Would it fall under Scribner's? Like we just
Yeah.
fixed the
So,
number.
but
We'll nail it.
have we had any?
Let's call it 14.02.
That's fine, but have we had any thought on keeping the new structure of adding the new articles? Not yet.
We
That's
we
fine.
don't necessarily have any issue with
Okay.
breaking them up and putting them in the different places.
Okay.
That's not been, you know, there's not been any kind of objection to that. So I think we're fine. It's just gonna be a matter of, it's kind of confusing at this point in time because we
Yeah.
gotta make sure that once we get on common numbering and can
Yes.
get the formatting issues out of the way, then it becomes easier to deal with.
Okay, thank you.
So, the next issue is related to, it's really a counter proposal. We had originally intended to bring this forward as a proposal in any event, but then you guys came forward with a proposal as well, so it became a counter. This is mirroring language that is in the Orange County contract currently. And what this does is essentially set a time frame for which, you know, it's obviously in response to your proposed language. We don't feel like your proposed language meets the needs of the district. At the end of the day, you know, I know the idea that it is the prerogative of the district to determine who it is and when we hire individuals. That is one of the baseline, you know, tenets, if you will, of 447.209. You know, employee rights, the employer's right to direct its employees take disciplinary action. Hire, promote, transfer, assign, retain employees. That is something that is the exclusive right of the employer. Okay. And so what we've proposed here is language that we feel like takes a step out and gives an option that does not currently exist. So as it is right now, we can make the determination whether or not to hire someone during the middle of the school year, and it's our own problem. What we're saying is that we would like to set up these parameters that are established in A and B. And the difference is that A and B really emphasize the and show deference to Title I schools in terms of their staffing and the importance of staffing Title I schools. And then in addition, so what we're saying is that in both of these instances, we would require a certain, you know, within a certain time frame, that if a person is going to be transferred, there has to be an agreement between those administrators, right? The administrators shall mutually agree on the timeframes for the transition. And that should mutual agreement not be reached by the respective administrators, that there would be someone from the district that can step in and weigh in on that circumstance. And then this is the part that we feel like is new and is separate, is that there will be a hardship transfer provision that says that provides an alternative, if you will, for those individuals that are in this kind of circumstance where they can apply for a hardship transfer, right? And as you see in the current situation, there's no language that is like that, right? So yes, this would say, for non-Title I schools is 4 weeks, for Title I schools it's 6 weeks, but then provide for that hardship transfer, which would basically, allow for a hardship approval that's at the discretion of the superintendent or designee. And that we would consider the factors when determining whether or not that should be granted. And if that is determined as appropriate, that we would affect that transfer.
Are A and B the same except for Title I and non-Title
Well, basically,
So-
the first line that says
I?
that 4 weeks for non-Title I, 6 weeks for Title I.
Yeah, I mean, just saying, might be able to get less language if you just kind of put the 4 and 6 together and just follow with the rest of it.
Right.
The other part is, I don't know if it's intended to be superintendent or area superintendent on two.
That's
That's
LCTA.
a holdover from the Orange County language, if you will. So
Oh,
there's
okay.
that too. Just,
There you go.
So what's their structure?
Huh?
I just have so many more questions. What's their structure?
I don't know. I don't know what they're.
We used to have area people back in the day.
Like an assistant?
Well, they had
Right.
area
Or
director.
like-
Almost like an area. I interpreted it to be like an area director.
Yeah, like how you have like in each,
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying, is like an assistant.
right, like an area.
Assistant 5.
Okay, and then so obviously, with regard to that language, you guys can counter back, in terms of refining that to a point where we can agree, that'd be great. Now, back to the sort of annual issue of teacher transfer process. And what we have attempted to do in this circumstance is capture language from our last MOU that really focuses in on providing a preference to individuals who were employees prior with the district, right? We feel like it's important that those individuals, if they're qualified for the job, that they be given preference in the process. And so, this language is honestly pulled directly from that MOU. And so we can use it as a starting place. I'd be interested in seeing your responses.
Okay.
Now, in addition, there's the move
Mhm.
from 13.02 to what would amount to 14.03 B, once again, yeah, B. Where it talking about the assistance that we're providing to annual contract teachers who have been nominated.
Okay. As we get close to the end, we can do a screen session and put it on the screen and make sure we've got it all in the right format.
Yeah, sounds good. 16.05, this was an issue this is just for clarification. So we had an issue that came up around last year during the course of operations. And there was some question about whether or not the language in the contract did not specify that it was service with the board. However, our procedure clearly indicates that it's service with the language addresses the payment of sick leave and how long you have to have been working for the school system before, and then what level you've been working at the school system before you get paid out. So in one, it says the first 3 years of service with the board is what we're providing, is what we're interjecting. The daily rate of pay multiplied by 35% times the number of days of the cumulative accumulated sick leave is what they get paid, right? So all we're doing is adding and clarifying that this is service with the board rather than with FRS or with any other entity. It's with the board.
Is the board the best phrasing or should it be with LCS?
Now, the reason it says the board is because it mirrors what the procedure says.
Got it.
So I'm just trying to understand. I am a 20-year veteran. I transfer into Leon County Schools. I want to retire at 30 years. I've been in the district for 10 years. 1 for 1 is what I get to transfer in terms of leave, right? So if I earn 10 days of leave in Leon County Schools for a year, then that's 10 years in Leon County Schools, that's 100, and I can transfer in 100 of those days of leave from outside. And as retiring here under 10 years, I don't get the full payout. I only get the less payout.
That is correct. You don't, because that's what Florida statute says.
Gotcha.
10.12 or 1012.61, the language is taken directly from the statute. It's exact.
Okay.
So-
I'm making sure that all hearts
I mean,
and minds and
I think that, I honestly think that they, rationale, I think that they probably did that so that it would encourage districts to accept leave from other places. Because no district is going to accept a ton of leave from somewhere else and then immediately be expected to pay it out without some level of assurance that it's prorated or
I
something.
understand this is not our issue. I just want to make sure I'm cataloging this correctly when I go to the legislature, because if by no fault of myself, I have to move because of a family situation, I've now lost value in my leave. I can't transfer my leave. There's so many things that are now negatively impacting me, and it could be completely out of my.
Every one of those kinds of circumstances affects our ability to, compensate our
Again,
teachers.
that's why it's not for here. I just needed to understand it completely.
So with regard to your proposal in 16.09 regarding mixed leave usage. So as I've investigated this circumstance, what I've found is that this is already permissive. Okay, this is something that already occurs. And so I don't feel like it's appropriate to go in 16.09 under personal emergency leave. But what we feel like is that it should be captured in 16.06, where it talks about requesting and granting sick leave. And the provision that we've proposed to add is instructional personnel may request the use of multiple types of leave, multiple leave types in quarter-hour increments to cover a single contracted workday, provided that each leave request complies with the applicable provisions of Article 16 governing the respective leave type. Right? In 16, sort of recognizing y'all are moving comp compensatory time
Yeah.
to 16. And we are in this language. Just to clarify, we're recognizing that non-student contact time can be used incrementally through within the day to offset, so they can use. So in my mind, that is, they get roughly 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours of non-student contact time throughout in their day. Now the individual between the before and after school planning, the midday planning, and lunch. So that would, in the 7.5 hour day, because the duty-free lunch is included.
Just say 2 hours, yep.
So whatever it
Just
is,
make a
right?
number.
Whatever.
Yeah.
They could substitute that time, and they can already do that. They can put comp for 2 hours. They can put, sick or personal terms of sick for 5.5. No issues. So
Okay.
this is really just a matter of clarifying the practice, putting it into the appropriate place. And 17.01. This is related to emergency school closings. And to be honest with you, I spoke with the board about this and this is all the purview, once again, whether it's calendar related or operations of the district, it is the purview and the management right of the board. And we're fine with the current contract language as it is currently out. We have no desire to add additional language at this point in time.
Okay, is there a calendar committee working on the next set of calendars? Calendars? Calendars?
There is a calendar committee within the district. Yes.
Okay, so I've asked and requested an email to be put on the calendar committee and I've not received a single response.
Well, they've not done anything as of late. We
You've not
sent
done-
this out, at that point, the
Okay.
calendar, I think the calendar committee met a year and a half ago and set the calendar for the next 3 years.
Correct. Well,
Right.
this is
So-
the last one,
right.
right? So we're in the last
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Dr. Gale is responsible for that committee, right?
Generally speaking, she starts doing the work somewhere closer towards the end of October. And then by December, there's something that has been brought to DAC in January. maybe a survey,
It's like a
February
vote.
kind of thing. So it should be coming.
That's fine. Okay. Still email her then? Send her a
But
note.
I'd be happy to remind her that you'd like to take part. Okay, employee rate of pay, this is another one that came up as specific, just for clarity. The purposes of just making sure that people understand the contract. We're proposing that 21.015 will be revised to say employees selected by the Office of Professional Learning or other comparable district level entity to design and or develop district-wide instructional content, including curriculum, instructional materials, and diagnostic or evaluative assessment instruments shall be compensated at their hourly rate.
Okay.
Itemized pay stub. Okay, so there's what we've done here. So like, we've proposed counter language. And the reason for the proposal of the counter language is quite honestly, we don't feel like that it's appropriate for all of this information. It's not necessary for all of this information to be included in the contract, to be honest with you. As it stands, we will put as much information as we possibly can onto the employee pay statements that every employee has access to through Skyward. And so what we've also done is sort of tracked it down, and pretty much everything that you've asked for on your list is on our pay stub in some way, shape, or form. So we've outlined that through screenshots of each one of those places within the employee statement on Skyward. With the exception, so like, okay, with the exception of contracted teachers, not hourly teachers. So contracted teachers are paid on a salaried basis. So it does not include their hours or their hourly rate. It includes their contracted amount. If they are an hourly teacher, then yes, it does, because they are hourly. It includes their hourly rate and their hours for that given pay period. There's also a way, there's one thing that's not readily apparent, but like if you, the one thing like, okay, it doesn't include social security numbers, but that's because of like a info safety type of a issue. However, you can see the need for that. And there is a way that you can select to have it show, but it's not the default setting. So if you can go into, it's on here, you can go into there and see how to exactly do that so you can get the information. I would simply ask that if you guys have an issue with, if anyone expresses an issue with their itemized pay stub, that they let Gayla, where's Gayla? She didn't leave. Gayla Bussey know about that, and we're happy to help you. And then, of course, with regard to these kinds of things, we want to make sure that the information is readily available and clear. As we move forward with any kind of next generation with Skyward, we want to make sure that that also occurs. That's the main reason why we don't necessarily want to have it specifically outlined, because we never know what the capabilities will be. Now, this is pretty straightforward, but you know, there's no, if there is an issue that we can't control because it's an out of the box project, out of the box product, then it's one of those things that we don't have to.
I think that the primary issue is that if somebody does a PD that's paid or something, that sometimes it's difficult to know whether or not you got paid and how it's identified for folks, you know, in those cases. Especially if you've
Oftentimes
done
when-
2 or 3 different ones, there's not much of a differentiate. So like, how are you supposed to know that you actually got compensated?
For a PD, they're, most of the time, they're hourly, so it comes on a mid-month paycheck, and it does include the number of hours.
That's what I'm trying to say. It's not
But yeah, I mean, well, there is, okay, so
description.
there is a code, and, okay, I know it, don't laugh, but okay, we also have on our website what every single code means, readily available for, you know, from the payroll website. So with regard to like pointing to and saying,
I'm just
okay,
saying,
what does everything mean?
how many people
It's
have
out
access?
there.
Because I don't know if it's
I-
readily available.
Go. It's so I don't know how many people in this room would go and actually dig into this.
How many?
Did I say it was
There you
interesting?
go.
No, but
Hey, I have.
you know, it's
I haven't
available
seen
on the
that
payroll
before.
website, where if you want to see what the codes on your check stub mean, they're there.
That check stub description.
I was gonna say, is there
I didn't
not a
get
way
that
to hover
quickly.
over there?
Yeah, that's it. I looked at it. Okay, so I think.
Did you
what
get
we-
there?
Yeah, okay. I maybe I'm normally fast pulling up contracts and bargaining and all that, so I'm wondering if we can give a link to people. And then let them be.
Okay. The next aspect of this, I'm trying to figure out where. Okay, so now, okay. We're on 21.
20, yeah.
21.05 is the 21.5, 21.06, 21.07 is what I captured here. Well, I'm addressing this primarily to go to 21.05, we're fine that with that, those revisions. 21.06, we're crossing through right here because we feel like it needs to be in a different place.
Oh.
Okay? It
So
needs
you
to be,
moved it?
it'll be in a different place. And it's coming up next. Okay, I'll deal with it in just a second. 21.07 is going back to the credit for, you know, time in another country, essentially. So what we have outlined here, this is fairly technical stuff. We weren't quite sure what the intent of the change where it said equivalently accredited 21.07H was. So if you can, so we can clarify that
Yeah. I can
for
clarify
me,
it.
we may be willing to reconsider that, but right now we crossed it out.
That
because-
was a typing error on my part. What is it? Article 21. Hold on, I'm in the right spot.
But just, if you
Should've-
know, maybe we could just contact, what's the relevance of it as well?
It should have read 21.07G instead of H, about private school experience. So the equivalent of what's outlined there, that would be considered what is accredited through that private school thing. So it should have been
So
G instead of H.
So then, okay, what I would ask is, well, consider what I have put here, what we've put here in terms of counter proposed language. And when you, if you have a proposal, counter proposal that would clarify exactly what your intent was.
Well, so instead of it saying 21.07H, it should say.
I understand, but I just don't, so like in what aspect is what I'm getting at. So 21.07G is about, you know, it's a pretty big piece of information. And so I just want you to be more specific as to what exactly you're referring to as it relates to typically accredited in the language. However, I also went ahead and said, okay, what we're willing to do here is upon determination, the district still needs to be able to determine that if such schools have the equivalent of state or regional accreditation. That's an important part of recognizing experience. Or if the educator held a valid educator certificate recognized by the state of Florida Department of Education or comparable professional educator credential / license recognized by the U.S. Department of Defense. And so basically what we're saying is if someone worked for the state of Maine previously and they had an educator certificate and then they went to work in Guam and they worked on a military base, well, we would recognize that experience even if that school in Guam wasn't accredited, because at the time the individual held a certificate in a state that has a reciprocal agreement with the DOE. And hold on,
And my turn.
If they worked at in another country for the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense determined that their credential that they possessed, or at the time, they recognized that, then we're willing to give them credit for that as well. However, we have no way to determine what, a country, across the world, whether or not they have standards as it relates to our educational practice or not. DOD has, they don't, unfortunately, I looked at this, they don't have a list that says these are all the ones that we recognize. What they have to do is do what we did before, which was evaluate the state regional accreditations, determine whether or not they're going to recognize it or not. So what we're doing is making it simple. If they provide a letter, document, so as you see, okay, picking it up like where I was, or a comparable professional educator credential license recognized by the U.S. Department of Defense as documented by official verification of credential recognition issued by the Department of Defense Education Activity, which is the name of their educational oversight group, right? And provided by the teacher while employed outside the USA will recognize.
So I guess my question is, how does this apply? Trying to create some parallels here. What does this mean then in terms of giving years of service to instructors at Lively that have work experience?
I'm not looking at it as having any impact on that.
No, but the reason why I'm asking is that in terms of the threshold for an actual teacher who is taught instruction, it seems like the bar is far higher than someone who may have been in a industry that then comes in with 20 years of service and is just placed at 20 years of experience at Lively. So
Yeah,
do you understand? Is it making sense? The
I
concern that we
understand
have?
what you're getting at, but at the same point in time, there's those are specialized programs where that they may not, they may not certify in those areas.
These are specialized teachers.
But someone who lives in, some, I don't know, name a country out there that it's underdeveloped, doesn't have a great education system. They may hire someone who's just educated, right? Doesn't have a degree at all, but they're a teacher. Right. And they somehow moved to the state of Florida, and DOD or whoever recognized them because they were educated. Well, they are not going to meet the same certification threshold standards that you as teachers do, and thus should not get credit for that time.
Well, by your own admission, then maybe we should not be going year for year with Lively the way you've discussed it, because you're going to treat the educators that are in the classroom
I believe
different
that
than the
those
other.
educators that are at
Or
Lively
we
are just
treat
as
them the
deserving
same.
as any of the teachers 4 years of experience, to be
Right.
honest. We've addressed that before. In fact, we changed that back to previously we did limit it, and it was highly unpopular for those instructors.
I know, because they want to get paid like the people that may have taught overseas.
So as it stands, we do not feel like it would be appropriate to go back on that.
I'm not asking to go back on it. I'm trying to create some equivalency so there's understanding.
What we're trying to do here is we're giving, but there's got to be a standard of giving. right? There's still gotta be a standard that says, okay, these are more options for people to receive credit. And as we recognize that, there's unfortunately, everyone's got a standard, right? When I look up DOD and what their standard was, it's like, okay, I wish they had a list, but no, they have to go through this entire review process in order to determine, are they going to be allowed to teach at those places, much less be given credit for experience.
Do the individuals that get credit for years of service at Lively have to have been licensed by the state of Florida in the field with which they are practicing? Or is it just, I was hired by Bill the plumber and I did some work? I'm asking for the current practice at Leon County School.
I'll turn to it. So
So every year that someone's credited, they've been a licensed individual within that field.
I would say it's a sort of nuanced question, because there are some, so there's new, you don't think it's nuanced?
Licensed is licensed.
So, but there are plenty of areas at teaching at Lively where they may not have a state license for the specific area that they're teaching.
Then how do you find out if it's a creditable year then?
Scott, what we have compared is those individuals, and this is all based on language that exists within the contract.
And I'm just
So
asking
that
for the
the
application.
LCTA agreed to. And so I'm not going to go back and litigate whether or not it was appropriate or not to do that. In fact, 3 years ago, we changed the language to recognize years of experience for instructors at Lively. And to be honest with you, I don't even know why we're having the conversation.
And I'm just
It's a
asking,
matter of fairness.
what is the process by which the district determines that? I don't think that's litigating something. That's a
It's
factual.
so I would direct you to the contract and say, look, everything is outlined within the contract. And we can talk about it more thoroughly if you like offline. But it's definitely not something that we're looking to go back. With regard to in-service activities, and then, so you guys, the union had proposed in 21.05 that we change the rate to reflect in-service activities for voluntary staff development activities that count as in-service credit, to change it the same way we did last year for the mandatory. And from our perspective, that if they're getting that part is recorded in-service activities in 7.03, it indicates that that those individuals would get $25 per hour. So what we've done here is just added this portion to that piece, because it does relate to in-service activities. And it still it's essentially the same language, still has to be approved. It still has to be subject to the availability of funding through grants and special entitlements. It's all there. It's essentially just recognizing the difference and changing it from 20 to 25. Um, 21.03. This is a counter to the language that that the union proposed related to changing the way we recognize credit for retired teachers. And at this point in time, this is language we're not willing to accept at this point in time. This is longstanding practice of the district. It would have a pretty impactful fiscal impact on us in a year where we can't withstand fiscal impact. So at this point in time, we are going to insist on current contract language.
We understand the desire to keep it as it is, but as we recognize all other years of credible service, it seems to be a double standard. We recognize for Lively, working outside of the school system, but we won't recognize our own instructors that come back after retirement.
It's
I
a
would
standard
ask
that
that-
LCTA agreed to.
I
Scott.
would,
It's in current contract language.
right, I understand that. Am I allowed to talk about anything other than what's currently in the contract? Because it clearly seems as if any time that I make a valid point that it gets responded to in a way that's dismissive and it's the contract and LCTA agreed to it. So it may not be the intent, but it's what's being received right now. What I will say though, is that let's take, for example, an administrator who has retired. When that person comes back to work with the district in any capacity, is that person limited in their pay?
I can't speak to that. As a
I'll tell you,
rule,
no, it's
as,
not
as,
in past
no,
practice.
as a rule, I know that it has been employed in the past. Does it happen all of the time?
So
no, I don't know
when
that for a
Joe
fact.
Marie Old came back all those times, she was
I don't
only
even-
paid at 20%
So I don't even
for
know who
20
person
years.
you're talking about.
You don't have to know because it's
So,
what.
but that was the
past
point of my
practice
conversation is
was.
I can't speak to all of them.
Okay. My point is, there's a double standard that we see in potentially how individuals, depending upon their level, are treated when they return to the school system. If you value the work that someone has done and their experience in one place, but you don't in the other because you don't want to deal with the financial implications, that is a double standard at some different point. And it's just something that we are bringing forward that we would like to recognize these individuals if it's being recognized elsewhere. Whether or not you accept the language, you have that opportunity and you declined it. But I just need to be able to make the point about it.
Well,
That's all.
and I understand, I mean, we say dismissive. All I'm getting at is, these are things that have been longstanding aspects of our contract.
We're in
That
negotiations to
was,
change.
were
those things at
developed
times.
collaboratively, right? So it's not like we ever had the ability to force you to accept language. That's the reality. And so when you talk about a negotiation process, it's, it's just very difficult to go back and say, oh, well, I know we agreed to that 3 years ago, but now we don't agree with it anymore. We want to change it. So
That's why we're here, Fred. So you can modify the contract as needed
That's
as
why
we
it has to
move
be-
forward.
it has to be unilateral. There has to be.
I understand all those things, but you're saying that we can't bring things
I'm not saying you
forward,
can't. I'm just
or-
saying that
propose differently, or change maybe our basic understanding of each other because it was already in the contract. Moving on, 26.
100%. 26.01, because we are essentially changing the language in 13 related to the Turk committee, we are proposing to strike that committee from 26.01. It would be replaced by whatever committee it is or whatever group it is, that panel that we agreed to as part of the appeal process. But it would not be a committee per se, it would be a panel, and thus would not go with this section.
So. All. TERP helped build the entire system that is in place right now because of our collaborative efforts all the way back to 2014 through David Clark and the rest of us. And we would not have such a wonderful system if we had not worked together, because you were able to hear the things that were in terms of implementation and everything. So although I understand there's an appeals process, all I'm asking is then, maybe this is outside of this conversation, what is that mechanism then to deal with issues that may come up in order to at least inform the superintendent about how the evaluation system is being implemented, so that if there are modifications that are necessary, how do we address those? So.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, and I just want to make sure, and this is, well, I could be really snarky right now about that you guys agree to this language, but we'll just move on.
Okay.
See, gotcha. You even smiled on that one.
All right, okay. But so the point is that the
Look, you're half the team's having to look down and smile somewhere.
bottom line on Turk is that it's not active even now, right? And so the fact that
There was a request to review.
I've been here 5 years and it hasn't been convened once. So in that time, it'll tell you how often it's utilized.
COVID.
And
has
what
a
we're
way
trying
do
to,
it.
what we're trying to do here is to establish this new process that we have an appeals, we have an appeals panel that will address it. And, you know, we're open to input, if you will, but ultimately it is the purview of the superintendent and the board to set these processes. And we don't feel like there is a need for a committee that addresses that as a. And then finally, that's the last of our provisions. Now, you'll notice that, well, not the last, but the last of the ones I've passed to you. There's two that we haven't addressed that we talked about the last time, setting up work groups to try and flesh out. One is the AI and the other is supplements, Appendix B, if you will. We're still interested in setting those groups and would be willing to convene those groups as soon as you're willing to provide individuals that are willing to participate in those groups. So I'll leave that with you. And so hopefully we'll be able to convene those soon.
I know I'm not a part of this. But I need to say something. So just take a deep breath and please listen. I can't.
Nope.
It's not part of this process.
I know it's not.
The last bit here is I've got our compensation proposal for this year. We'll go ahead and pass that.
I can do that.
Waited 2 hours for this moment, God. Don't blow it. All
Are you
right.
trying to?
It's easy. There's just, you know, one paper after the other. Don't overthink.
You don't do that all last time.
I get some nice chats.
Brett set you up to fail from the beginning. Giving you the-
Notice how you wanted to speed it up, but I need quality control. Did you
Yeah.
And you're remaining very calm and.
10 out of 10, you know?
Sorry. I gave it
All right,
all
you
good.
just- you gotta check me, that's good. Do I need copy?
Whichever one has the most zeros.
It's the other one with the big bucket.
Where is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Where is it?
Mhm.
Zeros and stuff here. And the commas. And the commas.
The greatest value.
I still think you're. We're doing greater than less than right now.
What does that look like?
Oh, here, wait, I got two sheets.
Very hard. Thank you.
You'll be the wrong person's fault.
Or what did you write?
Because 2 times 9 is like 127.
I am.
All right, so as has been communicated widely, this is a very poor year for fiscal circumstances in the district. And so we have been allotted, while we, you know, are essentially facing about a $6.5 million deficit on what we received last year in terms of funding, when you're considering all of the you know, increases in various rates, if you will, for insurance and FRS and everything. We have been allotted $1 million for teachers and pay increases. And so the theme earlier, really around compliance, we're proposing that we utilize the $1 million that has been allocated by the state for teacher increases in accordance with 10-12-22 performance pay. And spend 80% of that, on, outlining shares for individual shares based upon their performance rating. So this is 100% follows the book as it relates to state statute on, performance pay. But it also includes 20% being used for a COLA. The COLA is essentially going to be 50% of, the effective share. Okay, and so if there's any additional, if after taking into consideration all of the individuals that received a share, there's money left over, which I doubt there will be, it would go back into the 80% to ensure that the highest share possible is distributed among the highly effective and grandfathered employees. Now, we're also taking into consideration that instructional personnel who have not yet earned a year of service with the district related, that's specifically related to the standard set within the contract for a year of service, would not be eligible, and nor would individuals hired or rehired in 2025-2026 school year.
As we have not had a grandfathered schedule, could you please explain the implementation of that and
Yeah.
as well as what the money amount per person is, because I think that should be a part of it.
I don't have the money amount per person yet because we've not yet finalized all of the evaluation ratings. They are set to be finalized by the end of this month. So we should have that soon.
So Friday.
But there are still some outliers out there. They have to be reported to the state and then transferred over into the system. At that point, I'll be able to cost out and say exactly what the shares will be. But grandfather schedule, basically, if you look at the grandfathered schedule, it's on 4 of the next, like if you look at the next page, it outlines what 10, 12, 22 says, right? The grandfathered schedules are individuals that were hired prior to July 1, 2014, when the state mandated that every person is an annual contract teacher, right? So then in addition to that, if you go to performance pay, what it says is that as it relates to salary adjustments, the annual salary adjustment under the performance salary schedule for an employee rated as highly effective must be at least 25% higher than the greater than the highest annual salary adjustment available to an employee of the same classification through any other salary schedule adopted by the district. So that's why when you look at the whole share, it's 1.0. And the effective and the grandfathered share is 0.75. It's because it means that the effective teacher is receiving 25% more than those two. That's what it is. But it's strictly from the statute.
So if I'm highly effective, but I'm considered grandfathered, I get the less amount.
That's correct.
So a veteran teacher who's been here for 20-some years and has been highly effective is gonna get less.
You have the, so once again,
She's got to give up her
go
contract.
to 10, 12, 22.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what he just said is correct. I mean,
Yeah, they want you to give up your contract.
you have it.
Right,
It's by
that's-
design.
that's-
It makes no sense.
If you
It's
give
by
up your
design.
contract, you get more money.
So you give up your PSC, so your annual contract, and you'll get more money.
But so
That's a design of the state.
the recurring thing here is we're trying to be in compliance with state law.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with.
No, this
Blair
is
County.
legislature. I just want to be clear on this.
Okay, so simpleton math, like as basic as it gets. Before taxes, the monthly increase for a 12-month employee,
Can't
No,
speculate.
no, go ahead, continue.
You should ask.
it's $38 a month. And given the health insurance increases, an individual this year will be making less than they made last year. I mean, that's.
I can't confirm or deny it. I don't know what the numbers are. But it is a function of where we are from a fiscal perspective at this point.
So how is it? Well, I guess we'll have some internal conversations, but as I mentioned yesterday and shared with the school board, Madison County was able to find monies, Wakulla County was able to find monies. There's districts around here that are given 4% because of choices that they've made to make those things happen. So it's just concerning that this would be the first best, last final offer of the district, because I know how things kind of work around here with these things. So, disheartening is not even, it is going to have a moral impact that it will be devastating. And it was decisions that still, they're decisions. They're your decisions, and we will bring it to our body and they will have a decision to either say yes or no. So,
Well, and, I think that our board is equally concerned. No one likes this at all. No one likes this.
but
at
when
all.
you budget the raises left, it's kind of where you end up.
Because we talked, you and I had several conversations about could we meet prior to June, July, right? And have budgetary conversations so we could be out ahead of this. Right, at the end of May, we're like, hey, let's get on the calendar, let's start bargaining. And then that's when everything was in a freeze because of legislatively, they had stopped negotiating. And then like we had talked about, like, maybe we could get out ahead and have a discussion on salary, but because legislatively it was frozen, that was delayed and so on and so forth. So this feels like another scenario where the can was kind of kicked down the road due to a variety of reasons.
I don't know that, I hear you. I don't think that anything that had we met at that point in time, it wouldn't have made any difference.
Their choices were going
It
to
would
be
not
the
have
same.
made any difference at all. However, because at that point, we didn't know what our allotment was. We didn't know what it was going to be. And so and then as soon as we knew, it's been public from day one, where we stood. At one point, we thought we were down 12.5 million, but luckily that money came through. Right. As it stands, no one likes it at all. No one likes it at all. At all. The board, the superintendent, me sitting here, I think is terrible. But it's where we are.
So I think that the idea that nobody likes it, but yet we're not going to propose something different is a death statement, right? We don't like it, but we're not going to make any effort to look for something different. That makes no sense to the people sitting on this side of the table. Is if I don't like something, I don't like an activity, I don't like a lesson, I don't like something that's happening at my house, I change it so I do like it and I can live with that decision. What we're being presented today, and I know that you are a spokesperson of the board and superintendent, right? But what we are being presented today is we don't like it, but we're not making any effort to change it.
I don't know that is not true at all.
But
But
you've
if
had,
that's what you want to leave it at, that's fine.
but
Because I think that there are numerous situations that have occurred just to be able to maintain where we are right now.
correct.
And so
But
it's just not.
we started bargaining mid-July, right? And we kind of pushed this back until legislative, all of the things, right? There has been plenty of time in some ways to go, hey, this is all we've been allocated, because that's been public knowledge. We don't love it. Where can we look at our budget to make a change? And an active decision by the superintendent and the board has been to not make that change. I'm not blaming you. You guys are just the ones sitting here, just like we're the ones that sit here and represent LCTA, and we have the dialogue, right? When we don't like something and we bring the changes, that's what we're trying to do. And it's like, hey, we don't like this, but we're not willing to make the effort to change it. So here we go.
What we've chosen to do is maintain the level of service within the district. And that means, the support for students, the support for personnel. And you're right, there are choices that could be made that would be very negatively impacting of maybe specific individuals within this district. But the decision has been to maintain and to continue to try and offer services to our employees and to keep people on board while we can.
There won't be any more support for students if the people that are in those buildings supporting the students can't function in their homes. our cost of living, as you all know, because you're living in the same state, has gone up drastically. And so when we talk about the support of our classrooms and the people that are in them, and we go back to them and say, you get $38 a month on simpleton math, right? 1,000 divided by the number of employees, that's what it comes out to. Or a million divided by that, right? And we say that you get $38 a month. There are people sitting in those classrooms that won't even get them to and from the work site, right? That's not even a tank of gas for them for a week. And so that support is now not there. And when we want to support our students, but we're not making the effort to support the people in the buildings financially. And again, you all are just the ones sitting here. And I think that there's other conversations that are happening behind the scenes that we're not privy with, just like we have conversations behind the scenes that you're not privy to. This is the reality. And this is a tough pill to swallow, bring back to our group when we have people that are sitting on this side of the table working 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to get by on their monthly expenses. And that's like, this is a nightmare. Like, I can't, right? I'm someone that has to accept this, and this is a nightmare. And this is like this just doesn't seem like any sort of respect to the people that are in these classrooms.
And I think the idea that support is something other than the teacher in the classroom is like, it's the last support that's thought about.
We're
In
speaking
this financial part.
specifically of the teachers in the classroom.
If you take a look at, if you want to know a person's priorities, look at their checkbook, says a school board member. The priority is not the staff at this point that takes care of the kids. It's the shiny program over here. It's this part over there. It's these other things, not the ability of that person's who is dedicated to those students to be in front of those students. As if we're replaceable, let's go find some younger teachers cheaper or something. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm telling you, this is going to have, if this is it, this is going to have consequences that are just, that not us. I'm telling you, the morale at schools, the great start that we had was just shot. So we understand the proposal, and we've got some language that's impact bargaining we'd like to share. Okay, let me get through it real quick then. And I think what's also even more frustrating is that knowing that this is the salary increase and you want to talk to us as if you agreed to this language. The dismissiveness of some of that stuff in lieu of even this salary proposal is even more disrespectful than you, because so we'll start off with Article 7. There seems to be some discrepancy of intent and recognizing that independent time is important to meet the needs of the students in the classroom. And part of the issue of the settlement was to protect that time. So therefore, for clarity purposes, rather than every effort to be made, at least 4 of the 6 hours shall be reserved for individual planning. And then it outlines that it's 6, 4, and midday very clearly, so we don't have to worry about interpretation. Any questions? No.
We'll be happy to counter.
10, 11, threat management teams. It is not, I've listened, or I reached out to Tanya Fitzgerald. Tanya has shown what a school counselor is supposed to do. It's extensive, extremely. And it doesn't include being the chair or co-chair of the threat management team that takes 4 hours to complete a threat assessment. You're not meeting students in your actual capacity as a guidance counselor. So therefore, we propose that the district shall have these teams, that the chair and vice chair shall not be a member of our bargaining team, and that shall ensure all employees that are on these teams are trained, and that the chair appointed can go ahead and counsel with other individuals when necessary. And the last one is participation in meetings and training should occur during the day when possible. Compensation will be provided per the collective bargaining agreement, hourly rate afterwards, kind of stuff. Involuntary transfers, we had discussions, but we want to make sure that we codify some of those things, that if you're going to have a teacher that is an elementary school teacher that had 5 days to prepare for a classroom, that they have 5 days to prepare for their new one, because not only do they have to prepare, they have to break down the classroom, they have to go to the new classroom. They got to make sure they understand the new culture and climate of the school, because process and procedures are not uniform within the district. So, but we also recognize that there may be some people that may need more time, which is why we say in part 2 that plan that they can request additional time, or 3, should I say that, and that they can modify the 5 days. So if a teacher is a high school teacher and they don't have to do all the other stuff in a classroom, and they can start 2 days in and they want to start 2 days in, they can do that. But we give them a flexibility, but they have 5 days when it first happens. The employees that are not transferred but are impacted by such, meaning gaining additional students and things like that, we believe that they should be able to get 1 day at minimum in order to go ahead and get to know the students, figure out how they're going to be changing their classroom. It's a planning issue. These are just things that we'd like you to consider. When we go to the memorandum of understanding, we know that there is the incentive that we've been doing for certain certifications. In order to go ahead, and I know you think that's professional responsibility, we do as well, but we also have some mutual need in terms of making sure that we don't get dinged for people that are out of field. And therefore, anyone that's completing the ESOL requirements, showing progress as determined by the state, or adding certifications to their assignment based on maybe their placement. For example, I'm a K-6 teacher, right? But then I'm told I need you to be an ESE teacher. Well, if I'm going to go put that on, I should be able to get that $500 as well as I'm showing progress. So it would be for each one of those instances, someone would receive the $500. But, you know, if we're going to do it for one group, it makes sense for the other. And quite frankly, it goes back to trying to figure out what's the alligator closest to the boat. It's not meant to be forever, but at some point in time, we've been dealing with certification, especially ESOL from 2017-18. Let's actually put some incentive towards it to make sure people get across the finish line and we're all being successful at the end. Teacher transfer process. I was trying to figure out a place to where to put this. It's not the right place, but at the same time, it seemed at the point, but when it comes to reappointments, we do not believe that department chairs or team leaders or anyone should be asked whether or not, you know, evaluative information about another employee for the purposes of reappointment. That is an administrative duty solely. So, you know, and with the blurred lines that we have, you've got people on websites that it says our administration team, and it's assistant principal, dean, it's another teacher, guidance counselor, like that all needs to be cleaned up. They're not administrators. We keep talking about how we want to make sure we're following our own policies and all those types of things. Let's make sure that we're in alignment. And then when it comes to the parental leave portion of it, we have an issue right now, and maybe this isn't the correct right way and you've got to counter for it, but many people we've talked to, where was I? I was at Lincoln. There were 2 teachers that had children last year. They had no idea how their salary was going to get impacted by taking leave during their pregnancy, and they got hammered, their take-home pay. We think that it would be reasonable that if someone does take leave and they don't want to see a significant monthly decrease, but they should be able to be paid out over 10 months, the remaining part, rather than 12, if they so choose. Meaning you won't see this super dip down because you got 2 months that you're not working, but you're getting paid for. And then they could deal with like maybe getting a job over the summer to get them to the August type timetable or something like that. So that's the intent of this language, that these people that are serving our children who may need to leave the classroom after they come back because they can't pay their bills because of the way the current system's set up, that they have flexibility in how they receive their money and full knowledge and notice of how their paycheck is going to be impacted, how they take their leave.
Yeah, the parental leave, understanding how the pay is impacted is super confusing because it's like delayed as well. So I thought when I had a child 3 years ago, I thought I was doing okay. And then it like kind of retroactively hit, but I was already back in the classroom. Because it's so, yeah, there's maybe some clarification on it. And then especially for our high school and middle school folks, some elementary friends that are getting supplements, how is that impacted as well, right? If you're not serving the supplement. And so I know that there's just some general confusion because there's just a delay, like people are taking paid time off, leave without pay, plus the short-term disability and, all the varieties of things. Now we have the additional week added in. So I know that there is a surprise inside when you start doing this one. It's like, oh, that's how that impacted.
So your request is just to switch them from 12 to 10?
That they have the option and full knowledge before they go ahead and take the leave, what's going to be the impact. Maybe they go ahead, instead of taking the full 6, they go, I'm gonna do 3 instead, like, but well, I'm just saying, like, the point being, they don't know what's gonna happen to them. Yeah, sorry,
He's not pushed about.
I was not a.
Never had a ball, got it. So, but yeah, there was just, it's one of those things where it's it's always happening, but there's just a lack of clarification. Then everyone's situation's a little different with how they use their leave and when they use it, so.
Okay. I think that we can obviously consider the additional information that you've brought forward. I don't know in all instances that impact bargaining is appropriate. However, we'll definitely consider and counter as appropriate. And, in other instances, work through the individual situations on a one-off basis. But, once again, we appreciate you guys taking the time today. I know it's not a warm and friendly message that we're having to deliver, but and believe me, it's not something that the people on this team or even the board want to be delivering. And so we understand. We can take the feedback and pass it along to the individuals that are responsible for these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, just know that we're trying our best to be in compliance with the law and to make sure that we're able to ensure the greater good for the entire district.
Your teachers are the greater good.
Well, and I'm referring to the teachers.
Yeah, well,
Referring to the
then guess what? When they can't pay their bills, that's a problem. So that's what we hear greater good all the time. We hear, we value. I understand that. It really comes down to models that are in place and they're perpetuated. Maybe there needed to be a big pivot in what we were doing because it's a crisis at this point in what was provided. So at the end of the day, the choices are made and that's all that is. So we move forward and we go through a process.
All right, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You guys want to stick around?
I'll see you Tuesday.
If anybody has any shortbread cookies, just again, my daughter's wanting to be a pastry chef. So have a cookie, write a note, be brutally honest, what's good, what's bad. No,
Jennifer, I have to, we are still talking here about something else. So, and I hear you on this, but